Welcome to my new solo game playing original 1974 Dungeons and Dragons rules. You might be familiar with my previous OD&D campaign, which at the time of recording is on a bit of a hiatus, but not to worry, I will continue with this in due course, as I will with Tales of Mystara and The Lost Mine of Phandelver and so on. But as these videos take a lot of time to make, I wanted to try a little experiment so I can make regular content on the side. Recently I've been studying the OD&D rules quite closely, along with chainmail and outdoor survival. And a popular pastime for me is to untangle these rules to discover a style of play that closely resembles the original intention, as I feel like much was lost in the later basic D&D re-edits and even AD&D, which was arguably a way to justify that the game had changed enough that Dave Arneson was no longer due a royalty. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy AD&D rules, but an interesting observation is that Gary Gygax definitely 360'd his approach to rule design, which significantly separates its intention from the intention of OD&D. Even modern OSR content, which tasked itself with cloning the original game, doesn't get it quite right in my opinion, as many of these rulebooks contain presumptions based on later influences. These games are fun and highly recommended to anyone who wants to try out old school role-playing with ease, but for the purposes of revealing the way the game was perhaps meant to be, they do fall slightly short, especially when it comes to the combat turn sequence, which was not included in the alternate combat rules and left the early adopters of D&D to reconcile the chainmail turn sequence with these rules, which didn't quite work because the turn sequence was designed for large-scale combats on a 1/20 scale. The man-to-man system in chainmail simply explained that all previous rules for large-scale combat apply, except where noted. I've come across many interpretations for OD&D combat with the alternate combat system. I've been very careful with my approach to read the rules extensively, along with the combat example written by Gary Gygax in Strategic Review 2. With common sense and an understanding of what Gary wrote, it's possible to piece it together in a way that I think is accurate. But sadly, I've never seen a faithful reproduction of OD&D combat in any of the OSR books I've read. With all this said, this video is not an attempt to explain my approach to the rules, but it will indirectly showcase them. I'm making this video to share my game with you purely for my own delight. Its value is in the eye of the beholder. I just really want to play a back to basics OD&D campaign, and to do it, I'll be sitting down with pencils, rulers, protractors, graph paper, hex paper, a large ring binder to keep all my game materials together, and of course the odd deployment of miniatures here and there for handling combat. I'll be experimenting with an emergent kind of play, which basically means there will be very little worked out before play begins. For my campaign setup, I have followed the advice written by Gary Gygax in the Europa newsletter published in April of 1975. I've drawn a castle on graph paper to act as the upper level of the dungeon. To do this, I used the section on constructing strongholds and castles from the Men and Magic rulebook. As far as the surrounding country is concerned, I have some blank hex paper at the ready, and at its centre will be placed the castle that houses the dungeons beneath, and close by the home base of the party. Play will commence in the form of underworld adventures with my first dungeon expedition. I'm going to be procedurally generating the dungeon using the solo dungeon adventure tables written by Gary Gygax in Strategic Review number 1. The rules will be played as written in the first 3 brown books. From this simple starting point and letting the details emerge through random generation, which, as the rules dictate, include much random monster determination and random reactions of monsters. Over time, a unique paper and pencil world will form, and from it many interesting adventures should emerge as my characters grow stronger, if of course they survive. I've already rolled up a party of characters. Magnus Ironheart, a fighter with 15 strength, 6 intelligence, 13 wisdom, 8 dexterity, 10 constitution, and 10 charisma. Ilara Nightshade, a magic user with 7 strength, 14 intelligence, 11 wisdom, 14 dexterity, 13 constitution, and 12 charisma. Brother Alden Lightbringer, a cleric with 13 strength, 14 intelligence, 16 wisdom, 14 dexterity, 9 constitution, and 15 charisma. Thraena Stoneforge, a dwarf with 17 strength, 9 intelligence, 8 wisdom, 8 dexterity, 14 constitution, and 7 charisma. Lyriandel Moonglade, or Lyria for short, an elf with 13 strength, 13 intelligence, 10 wisdom, 14 dexterity, 12 constitution, and 12 charisma. And finally, Finnick Overhill, a halfling with 9 strength, 8 intelligence, 5 wisdom, 8 dexterity, 13 constitution, and 10 charisma. Good luck to all of them. My method for recording my games will mostly involve me sitting at my table in front of my rulebooks, rolling physical dice and drawing things up with paper and pencil. I will impart the events of the game into a microphone, and dice rolling will be picked up naturally in the background. Visual aids will be done in post. I'll edit out unnecessary procrastination and musings, and I'll also omit rolls on the random dungeon generation tables, so from a listener perspective the game flows much like a group game would, but with the added bonus of less digression away from character actions and results. As visual aids are added in post, you'll note that I will be drawing the dungeon on graph paper as I go, but what is presented in the video will be the map as it stands after each subsequent recording session. I'll be adding in a primitive fog of war to compensate for spoilers and give you a better idea of what has been mapped by the party and what hasn't. This will not be representative of line of sight, but what has been mapped and what hasn't been mapped. You might note from the style of play that use of oracles and other kinds of solo play aids is relatively unnecessary, as the framework for solo play largely exists within the core OD&D rules. Character generation is simple with ability scores rolled down the line, so classes are largely determined by scores rolled and common sense. The dungeon is generated through tables, monsters always act randomly, traps are triggered usually on a 1 in 3, and faithful timekeeping along with wandering monster rolls and encumbrance rules creates the limitations from which real choices emerge for me as the player without much metagaming to avoid. And the best part about this simple framework is that with relative ease and a little imagination, adventures can emerge along with the world where they take place, and I as the player am along for the ride. So let's begin. Okay, so here we go. This is the first dungeon expedition. So, after descending into the maze beneath the castle, the party find themselves in a room 20 feet by 30 feet, with no obvious exits. Lyria searches the west wall at the foot of the stairs to see if she can find a secret door. But she turns up nothing. No wandering monsters appear. Lyria searches the northwest corner of the room, and she still finds nothing. She moves up to the northwest corner to try there. And this time, she does find a secret door. Thraina manages to pull it open. Beyond is a 10-foot by 20-foot room. Once again, this room has no obvious exits. Lyria searches the southern section of the room. To no avail. She moves up to the northern section and tries again. This time, she discovers another secret door. No wandering monsters appear. The party rests for a turn. Thraina opens the door, revealing a passage leading southwest, which the party follow for 30 feet. In the centre of the passage, the party discover a trapdoor, which, upon inspection, is clear that it leads down one level. The party decide to continue along the passage instead of descending to the next level of the dungeon. The passage continues another 30 feet before opening up into a chamber 30 feet by 50 feet. At the north end of the chamber, stairs descend, and there are no other obvious exits. Lyria begins a search of the south wall. No wandering monsters appear while Lyria is searching. But unfortunately, Lyria's search is not a success. So she moves along the centre of the south wall and continues her search there. She has no luck. No wandering monsters appear. Lyria's search continues into the southwest corner, where yet another secret door is found. So Thraina steps forward to open it. But this door is stuck. Thraina and brother Alden are going to break the door down. Thraina with her warhammer and Alden with his mace. This will require a full turn and 3 checks for Wandering Monsters because of the noise. But luckily, no Wandering Monsters appear. Beyond the door is a 20-foot by 30-foot room. The room is trapped with gas. And as the party move a quarter turn of movement through the room, the trap is triggered and will affect 4 members of the party: Finnick, Lyria, Thraina, and Magnus. The gas is a strength gas and will actually add 2 points of strength to each affected character for 20 turns. No Wandering Monsters appear this turn. The party are gonna rest for the remaining 3/4 of the turn and will remain resting for the first quarter of the next turn so that they can gain a full turn of rest to avoid fatigue. There are 2 doors on the north wall. Thraina opens the rightmost door, revealing a passage leading north for at least 30 feet. As they make their way along the passage, a fighting woman suddenly steps through a door on the east wall, coming face to face with the party. Both sides are surprised. The party has initiative and decides to ask the woman to join them in their adventure. They make an offer of 25% of the treasure recovered. Brother Alden will handle the negotiation with his high charisma score. The woman's reaction is hostile. She rejects the offer and insists the party continue north up the passage, whilst she will take a side passage which leads southwest, about 20 feet ahead. The woman warns that if she sees the characters again, she will kill them. I'm going to interject here and explain a couple of things. Firstly, Wandering Monster checks are being made every other turn. Usually they are every turn, but for now I thought I would go easy on the party as I find my feet with this campaign. Regarding secret doors, the ones in this level of the dungeon are mostly secret sections of wall that can be pushed inward and then left or right into the wall. They are heavy sections of stone, and so, as doors do, they will require strength to force them open. I just thought I'd explain that to help you with your imagination when you're trying to picture what's going on in the game. Before we get back to it, I also want to mention that I've changed my presentation a little. I've opened the map up as the primitive fog of war is a bit fiddly to handle in my editing software. I've also added in some digital tokens to help you track combat positioning. As I said, I use miniatures at the table from time to time, or just track things on graph paper. But I thought I'd add these digital tokens and dungeon tiles in post to make things a bit clearer. I've even added in some basic character information so you can't forget who is who. Another thing we can look into is what is the nature of this dungeon and the castle sitting on top of it. I've already worked out what lives where on the upper floor following the advice of Gary Gygax himself, who said, "It is a good idea to use the outdoor encounter matrix to see what lives where. A staircase discovered later just might lead right into the midst of whatever it is. There are various methods I could use to decide why a castle full of monsters sits nearby the character's home base, and why a vast dungeon hides underneath. Now, OD&D does not provide extensive numbers of tables for generating this kind of detail. In fact, it leaves all that stuff up to the imagination. OD&D, in my opinion, is a world-building game with focuses on emergent play, and the only details required really are those that are necessary to play the game. It is the procedure that matters, as this drives the story and the world building. Everything else is at the referee's discretion. Gygax says in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide from 1979, Rome wasn't built in a day. And he goes on to say, take small steps at first. The milieu for initial adventures should be kept to a size commensurate with the needs of the campaign participants. This will typically result in you giving them a brief background, placing them in a settlement and stating that they should prepare themselves to find the dungeon or ruin they know is nearby. As background, you inform them that they are from some nearby place where they are apprentices learning their respective professions, that they met by chance in an inn or tavern and resolved to journey together to seek their fortunes in the dangerous environment, and that beyond the knowledge common to the area, speech, alignments, races and the like, they know nothing of the world. Placing these new participants in a small settlement means that you need to do only minimal work describing the place and its inhabitants. Likewise, as player characters are inexperienced, a single dungeon or ruins map will suffice to begin play. Well, this is exactly what we are doing. The dungeon map exists and is being expanded procedurally, and the upper ruins has been defined. The castle that stands above the dungeon is not a ruin and is now the home to various monsters. Let's not go wild with the use of oracles or rolling on tables. Let's encourage some use of the raw imagination, as was the whole idea with OD&D. Due to the limitations of scope, I know, but all the same, let's keep it true to 1974 raw play. Let's say that the monstrous inhabitants of the underworld have undermined into the castle dungeons and forced its inhabitants out, and as a result, the undefended castle has been largely overrun. But by the nature of these uncivilized monsters who fight each other for space and territory, there is no organised guard. So adventurers enter freely at their own risk. Being a good source of food, armour, weaponry and fun, the monsters mostly let them try their luck. There is at least one dragon who has taken part of the castle as a lair, so there is one definite source of treasure there. Plenty of these details can be worked out just by having a good look at the map drawn of the upper ruin, and the random placement of the monsters there, and using some common sense. Bandits and brigands come and try to hold ground within the castle so they can reap some rewards therein. Magic users such as wizards and necromancers, surrounded by assortments of fighting classes, also try to establish themselves for the ready influx of coin and knowledge of the underworld, which is believed to stretch deep into the planet to a place called Agartha, which is inhabited by highly civilized beings who hold much ancient knowledge of magic. Also, the occasional magic user trying their luck in the castle is a good source of spellbooks, scrolls, wands, staves, and the like. There are also occasional anti-clerics driven by the same chaotic deities as many of the underworld races. Sitting on such a hellmouth with various evil schemes is a favoured spot for such mad devouts. I think this little bit of detail is enough to satisfy curiosity for now and give a sense of the workings of the castle and the pits beneath. But with that dealt with, let's get back to the game. No wandering monsters. The party travel 30 feet north where they come to a side passage which curves steadily northwest. They take this passage, and after 30 feet they enter a 20 foot by 30 foot chamber, which has a door in the northwest wall. Thraina tries to force it, but it's stuck. Alden and Thraina will break the door down, which will take a full turn, subject to 3 Wandering Monster checks. The noise provokes no encounter. A further Wandering Monster check is due at the beginning of the next turn though. The party remain undisturbed. They follow a passage southwest beyond the door for a quarter turn until they emerge in a 30 foot by 60 foot chamber. They move to the north end where they discover a 20 foot wide passage leading northeast, which they follow for 30 feet. The party enters a 20 foot by 30 foot chamber, which is empty, with no obvious exits. They return southwest, south and northeast, returning through the broken doorway, where they take the unexplored passage north. Once again, no wandering monsters. The chamber to the north is 40 feet by 30 feet. The party will rest here for a full turn. The party take one of 2 parallel passages leading south from the east side of the chamber. After 10 feet, the passage abruptly turns 90 degrees east, where, after a further 10 feet, it also meets the second parallel passage, and after a further 40 feet, it dead ends. Luria begins to search the space for another secret door. No wandering monsters appear while she is searching, and she successfully discovers a secret door on the south wall. You'll note the secret doors found so far have been forced open by strength, as is necessary in this section of underworld beneath the castle above. As I explained previously, the secret doors here are much like sliding sections of stone wall. So, as I said, they must be pushed to one side. And this is a relatively easy task for many of the monsters who inhabit here, but not so easy for the party. But Thraena, however, comfortably manages to slide this one open. Beyond is a 40-foot by 40-foot room, once again with no obvious exits. This time, Lyria, Ilara and Finnick will search for secret doors to maximise the chance of their discovery. They begin in the northeastern corner. Nothing. No wandering monsters. They move down the east wall, checking each 10 by 10 space. Nothing in the first space. Nothing in the second space. No wandering monsters. Nothing in the third space. Reaching the southeast corner, the three adventurers begin a search across the south wall next, moving from east to west. They find nothing in the first space checked. As they move along and start to look at the second space, their backs turn to the room, with Brother Alden and Thraena guarding. Something creeps into the torchlight, surprising them, casting no heat signature that Thraena can detect. From about 20 feet away, two deranged-looking humanoids used their surprise advantage to immediately cut the distance and raise their filthy nails to attack. "Ghouls!" Alden shouts in alarm. The party has the initiative on the first round. Lyria circles around the ghouls to make a bow shot at short range. Finnick does the same to gain a rare attack. Ilara holds her ground behind Alden and Thraena. Lyria hits one of the ghouls with an arrow. The arrow pierces the rotten flesh, but it does not go down. The ghouls will attack first in the melee. They score one hit against Thraena. She loses just a single hit point. Thraena fails her saving throw, so is now paralysed by the ghoul's touch. Alden and Finnick get return blows. Alden swings wide, but Finnick scores a hit. He manages to kill one of the ghouls. The remaining ghoul can now make its second melee attack. It attempts to bite Thraena, but she fends the creature off. The remaining ghoul passes a morale check, so will keep fighting. It wins the initiative for the second round. It misses Finnick with its first attack. Finnick scores a hit with his return blow and slays the ghoul before it can make its second attack. The combat has been won. The party continue with their search for a secret door. They check the southwest corner of the room. This time, they are in luck. And no wandering monsters appear while the search was underway. Beyond the door is a passage north-south and curving northwest. They have been here before. This place is just north of where they bumped into the fighting woman. The party move south 30 feet. They come to a door on the east wall, which is stuck. The party will take a full turn to break it down, subject to 3 wandering monster checks. Luckily, none appear. Beyond the door is a 40-foot by 40-foot room. Like so many others so far, it's empty. The party rest for a turn. No wandering monsters. The party move directly to the east wall. A secret door is found. Something is on the other side. As the party are entering through the door, their torchlight will not negate surprise. So here they have a chance to surprise the monsters. Both sides are surprised. Beyond the door is a 20-foot by 20-foot room, heavy with thick, gigantic cobwebs, home to countless ages perhaps of grime, and the remains of undefinable meals. Just 20 feet distant, 2 oversized spiders descend on thick, ropey webs directly in front of the party. The party has the initiative. Thraena and Alden move into the room, each flanking a spider at either side. Phoenix steps forward in their place to protect Ilara. As they reach the flanking positions, the spiders drop to the floor and scuttle around Thraena and Alden to counterflank, but Lyria, who is not moving, will make 2 shots with her bow. The shots are perfect, and she impales both spiders with ease. The party very swiftly searches the room before any further spiders are disturbed. Just ahead, they see an emaciated corpse, devoid of all its moisture. A withered carcass, barely possible to tell it ever lived or what manner of being it once was. Below, obscured by bits of sticky webbing, is a large sack. The party drag it from the room and hightail it back into the passage to offload the spoils. They retrieve 500 silver pieces and 50 gold pieces.